When you watch the mainstream media news, do you feel a little twitch? Is there a tingle in your left hand? Is your jaw locked? We have the solution. Welcome to Reasonable Arguments, the podcast where thoughtful debate meets unfiltered fun. Coming to you from Sarasota, Florida, where your hosts, Jamie Miller and Jennifer Bash, make sense of the chaos. Together, we mix informed conservative commentary, playful banter, and just the right amount of nonsense to keep it entertaining. This is Reasonable Arguments, and now your hosts, husband and wife duo, Jamie and Jennifer.
Ever wonder why the same political moves get cheers from one side and jeers from the other, depending on who's in charge? Today, we're unpacking 7 things Trump's doing that Democrats hate, yet their own party backed similar plays not too long ago. You ready to get into this, Jamie?
I'm ready.
The first one we're going to start with is mass deportation plans. What's happening now is Trump's launching a massive deportation push for millions here illegally, like a countrywide you're out of here sweep. He's even eyeing the National Guard to speed it up. Democrats call it brutal and a family breaker. Let's talk about what's happened before. So Truman deported over 1 million Mexican workers post-World War II via Operation Wetback in 1954, with Democrats seeing it as a labor fix. Clinton signed the 1996 Legal Immigration Reform Act, doubling border agents and deporting 70,000 in 1997 alone. Democrats called it tough but fair. Obama deported 2.5 million people, like 400,000 annually in 2012, and Democrats framed it as law and order. Biden deported 271,000 in 2023 via Title 42, with Democrats saying it's balanced security and humanity. Why is this confusing? Especially to me and other people, really don't understand the ins and outs of politics. It's the same idea. We're booting illegal immigrants out, but Democrats love it under Truman, Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Yet Trump's version, they lose their minds. Isn't it messed up to send parents back and leave their kids here crying, even if they've crossed the border illegally?
Well, here's the thing. Nobody's saying that they can't take their children with them. And that's ultimately kind of what Democrats are trying to say. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in our upcoming 4-part series about legal and illegal immigration and how to fix it. We talked about this with the gold card that Trump talked about, where every immigrant basically represents 14. Every immigrant who comes actually brings 13 family members with them. And I don't want to say it's tough love, but it is. They're deciding if they want to be deported without their children. If they want to take their children with them, they're more than welcome to take their children with them. But this is just a red herring by Democrats.
Well, I remember hearing that children put in boxes or put in prisons years ago, being separated from their families.
There was some sort of the whole Obama putting children in cages at the border, and I think those were mostly unaccompanied children. Biden completely lost 300,000 unaccompanied children. Even his own Department of Homeland Security said that those children are likely dead, enslaved, or sex trafficked. I think Obama did that to try to isolate children to, quote, protect them. And yet when that still was happening under Trump, it was like Trump's this evil person. So it's another just level of hypocrisy.
Why do you think it is that Truman, Obama, and Biden kick out tons of people, but why is Trump the only one that gets heat for it?
Well, Truman's funny because we only had 163 million people in the United States in 1954. So he kicked out more than 0.5%, almost 0.75% of the people. To put that in perspective today, that would be about 2 to 3 million people, at least today. 3 million people today. Population's grown about 3 times. Again, it is just hypocrisy. Obama kicked out 2.5 million people, which Trump's not even getting close to that number. Right now, he's just deporting criminals. And there's a little bit of a shell game we talked about in the past about the border, people getting deported right at the border. And we know that those border crossings have plummeted to less than 10,000 per month. In December of 2024, just a few short months ago, there was something like 200,000 or 300,000 border crossings. When Donald Trump said all we needed was a change in president, we didn't need to change the law, he was 100% correct because people got the message that they're not welcome here, and we're going to deport them if they come here, and certainly if they commit crimes.
They're not bringing to light everything that happened in the past. It's just because it's Trump that everybody is up in arms.
But without a doubt, like, it's politics, right? So it's funny because all of the things that you mentioned had some cute PR name to them. Even the racist Truman 1954 Operation Wetback, right? I'm sure that was a positive thing back in 1954, long before you and I were even born. But
now it would be offensive.
well, yeah, sure, it was offensive to Mexicans then. But to Americans, they're like, hey, we're going to send 1 million Mexicans back home because they're taking our jobs. Americans bought into it. And now it's anybody who is against deporting criminals, it just rings hollow. It's not they don't really have a valid argument.
The next part that we're going to be talking about is firing of federal workers. Trump's reviving Schedule F to fire government workers who slack off, saying it's about cleaning up bloated mess. Democrats call it a low blow to job security. They're upset by this. Let's talk about what happened before. LBJ cut 10,000 plus federal jobs in 1965 to shift funds to
LBJ
society.
is a president, right?
Yes. You taught me that on the other one, and that that's the one that's very well endowed, right?
Yes, Jumbo.
Yeah, Jumbo. Exactly. He cut these jobs to shift funds to Great Society, with Democrats praising smart budgeting. Carter slashed 20,000 plus jobs via the 1978 Civil Service Reform Act, and Democrats said it streamlined bureaucracy. Clinton axed over 300,000 jobs, 47,000 from defense in 1993, to reinvent the government, with Democrats cheering efficiency. Biden froze federal hiring in 2021 to review staffing, with Democrats calling it a fiscal caution. Why is this confusing? Job cuts were a Democrat win under LBJ, Carter, and Clinton. Biden's freeze is a little bit different, but with Trump, everybody's losing their mind.
Well, I read about this Friday or Saturday in my Substack at Reasonable Arguments, where they started with USAID, which is a slush fund for past administrations, both Republican and Democrat. The fact is that it's been overly Democrat because Democrats have been in charge for 12 of the last 16 years. I encourage people to go to LinkedIn and just type in USAID and start looking at the resumes of people who show up. Obama administration, Obama administration, Obama. Almost all these folks are from the Obama administration and couldn't get jobs out in the real world, so they plant them over at USAID and to supposedly take democracy to the rest of the world. The way that Trump and Musk started with Doge slashing USAID was particularly offensive to Democrats because it cut so many of their friends and family. They looked at USAID as a nepotism organization where, hey, if cousin needs a job, let's put them over at USAID. In the Substack I wrote, USAID had the largest growth of any department under Biden, something like 36% growth in 4 years. And they were just planting people over there and giving them high-paying jobs on the taxpayer dime, sending them around to first-class hotels around the world, and taking pictures with school children saying that it was to promote democracy. There's better ways to support democracy throughout the world than what we were doing, but this particular cut at USAID was taken as an offense to all Democrats, and it should have, because they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar.
So is there a way to audit, you have the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, how these people are connected to people within the Democratic Party?
I'm sure you can. I'm sure that will happen, but I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of, other than me going to LinkedIn and searching USAID and finding people.
Well, not us specifically, but I mean, you have a tech genius running Doge. There has to be some kind of program he can create that says, how are they connected?
How's everybody connected? I mean, the truth of the matter is both sides know that that's what USAID was for. If you were mid-level staff member for a congressman who died or was beaten or decided to retire, Democrats and Republicans alike have a job over at USAID to, travel the world and do their thing. We can argue whether some of those programs are good. We've argued it before, but what we're talking about here is, why it's why the hypocrisy of Democrats is so apparent. When they they don't want to see government workers cut at all, And yet we know when corporations have a tough time, they lay off about 18.5% of their employees. If you take USAID out of it, we're not even close to laying off 18.5% employees. And yet when Democrats cut, like you suggested, every Democrat administration previously has at some level either frozen or cut government employees before. Now, Obama grew it, Biden grew it. Those two especially ended up growing government employees. But even Obama in 2009 and 10, because he was worried about his reelection and the midterms and all those sorts of things, I think he froze hiring in the federal government. Then it exploded over his last 6 years. They don't want to see government cut. Part of the whole thing is that when Biden said, "Oh, I created so many jobs," he created more government jobs. When you have these jobs report, it includes government jobs. And that's the funny thing. Last month, they're like, "Oh, Trump missed his jobs numbers." They expected for 160,000 jobs to be created in February, and 151,000 were created. Came 9,000 jobs short. And any other headline would have been like, "Oh, Biden was within the margin of error." But no, Trump missed the jobs mark. But what's lost in the details is that 90% of the jobs created were private sector jobs. When Biden had these reports, 30% were government jobs. Like when he was growing, it was like, "Oh, we're in trouble. Let's deficit spend. Let's hire people into government, and it'll make it look like our economy is doing better than it is." But it's doing it on the back of American workers and on American taxpayers.
So it truly just depends on who's doing the firing of who's going to be mad that day.
Apparently, from what your historical perspective that you brought forward, yes.
Next, we're going to talk about boosting fossil fuel drilling. So Trump is opening more land for oil and gas drilling to keep fuel cheap and America energy strong. Democrats say it's a planet killer and ignores climate change. Let's talk about what happened before. JFK pushed oil production tax breaks, and Democrats saw it as a pro-growth. Clinton expanded Gulf of Mexico drilling, 1,000 plus new leases in 1995, with Democrats calling it an economic win. Obama approved 1,500 plus offshore leases in 2012, hitting top oil producer status by 2014, and Democrats bragged about energy independence. Biden kept oil leases flowing like 2,000 plus in 2022 on public lands, despite climate goals, with Democrats defending it as practical. Drilling was a flex for JFK, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, but now with Trump, it's completely wrong.
Oh yeah, he's destroying the earth. It's horrible. But we know the United States economy is based upon energy. If you want to have a good economy, and it's still coal, oil, or nuclear, and to create, we're going to need 30% more electricity added to our grid in the next 4 years just to run AI alone. Forget about electric vehicles. Forget about increased anything else. 30% more electricity to our grid to run AI alone.
Insane.
We're not going to get there through solar. We're not going to get there through wind technology. We know that those things are almost counterproductive. Solar, not as much as wind, but wind has been counterproductive to the environment, to nature, to birds. It's just not cost effective. It costs more to keep these things up than the electricity they produce. Solar's coming along, but it's still not going to replace. You can go up in North Florida, they have hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of acres of solar to run a couple hundred houses to add to the grid. It's not super efficient yet. And so it's going to, for the next decade at least, going to be oil, coal, and nuclear that we're going to need to produce this extra electricity just for AI.
Is climate control going to change because of what Trump is doing? And does the drilling really help with gas prices for the American people?
Well, I've always thought climate change, global warming, when we were kids, it was global cooling. It's all positioning to try to help their friends.
Back up a second. What was happening with climate cooling?
Remember when Niagara Falls froze over in like 1975 or 1976? They talked about an upcoming ice age, right? And gosh, these winters are so cold that we're going to face an ice age. And then it went into global warming. We have to get rid of hairspray. We have to change our air conditioning freon. Every step of the way, you have to follow the money. Are those good things to do? Sure. Are we going to destroy the climate? I still think most climate change was probably due to nuclear testing back in the 40s and 50s. It takes a long time for some negative impacts to take place. And Donald Trump even said today in an interview that everyone talks about the threat of climate change, and yet the biggest threat to humanity is still nuclear weapons. And nobody ever talks about that. We're not going to have climate change destroy us tomorrow. They're talking about 1,000 years from today. Or over 100 years, where the ocean's going to rise to a quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch or whatever, and how that is horrible. And it very well may be, but it's not the same as a nuclear war. We have bigger problems, in other words, and we have to face those problems.
Next, we're going to talk about pressuring Ukraine for peace deals. Trump is cutting Ukraine's military aid and pushing them to deal with Russia, even if it means losing land. Democrats say it's abandoning an ally to Putin. Let's talk about what happened before. Truman backed the 1947 UN Palestine partition land for peace, with Democrats calling it pragmatic. Carter pushed Egypt-Israel talks in 1978, Camp David, pressuring concessions, and Democrats praised peace over pride. Clinton brokered the 1995 Dayton Accords for Bosnia, giving up territory to end war, with Democrats hailing it as a lifesaver. Biden urged Israel-Lebanon ceasefire talks in 2024, with Democrats backing diplomacy. Peace deals were heroic under Truman, Carter, and Clinton, but they're weak with Trump. Why should Ukraine have to give up land just because Trump wants war over fast?
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily where we're at, is the deal that Russia gets to keep the land that they've taken over, just because the deal's not done yet. I think Donald Trump, during the quote Oval Office blow up with Zelensky, prior to that, he's like, listen, I'm the guy who has to be tough on both of them, meaning both Putin and Zelensky. And then everyone, because of the blow up, they're like, Trump is in the pocket of Putin, or he's a Russian asset, which nothing more ridiculous could be even put into the public domain. Does it end up getting to a place where Russia keeps some of that land? I don't like the precedent that these Democrats set. That's the truth of the matter, is that when you're making a deal for peace, you have to both sides have to walk away probably a little upset, not upset enough to continue the war. I think Trump is trying to guide both parties. Donald Trump does these things in the public eye. More so, he's more transparent than any president in our lifetime, and certainly in the media age of television. And people are seeing the sausage being made, and quite frankly, a lot of people just don't like it. They'd rather be naive to it. And Donald Trump's like, I'm going to do out front the American people. He's having daily press conferences. He's signing things in the Oval Office and talking to reporters for an hour or more himself, not his press secretary. He's a different president. And there's no question that he wants peace. There's no question that he feels like he has to be tough on both Zelensky and Putin. And, we'll see what that type of negotiations he brings to the table and what kind of deal is made.
You having the background in politics like you do, with the transparency, do you feel you like seeing everything that's going on behind the scenes, or would you rather read about a little bit here and there and then see the outcome?
I think things have gotten so bad that the American people have got to a point where, majority of people, a plurality of people, not a majority, a plurality of people did not believe the 2020 election was conducted in a free, fair, and transparent manner. And that's a problem when you have 40-something% of Americans saying we don't trust our government. I mean, trust our own government. Forget about Russia and Ukraine. They don't trust our own Department of Justice. And so that's a real problem. It's a double-edged sword. Sometimes you would think like, hey, maybe this is a better discussion to have in private versus out in front of all the cameras. But I think things got so bad, and Obama and Biden changed our country in a negative way so poorly, that the trust for government is so low that Donald Trump is probably doing the right thing by being as transparent, even though it may create some fires that he could possibly avoid by having these discussions in smoke-filled rooms.
Yeah, I would agree. I love the transparency. I'm a transparent person, so tell me how it is, let me see how it works, and let me give my 2 cents on it or whatever. So I love seeing it happen, but I can see where more sensitive people would be offended by things.
I don't think offended is the right word. I just think that it gives more fodder for everybody, for both sides, to say this, that, or the other thing, or they think that there's more going on than there is, or they're reading into it. Everybody read into this Zelensky meeting that Trump is pro-Russia. And that's not what happened. If you watch that whole thing or read the transcript, that's not what happened in that meeting. It was that there was an economic deal that was made about minerals, and Zelensky tried to renegotiate that deal to include military strength. And the mineral deal had nothing to do with the military. And Trump, I think, acted appropriately. Whether you want to say he could have had a little bit more softer gloves with it, you could make that point, but who cares? Like, at the end of the day, Democrats, you're proving here through your questions and through historical record, Democrats were going to criticize Trump no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather them criticize Donald Trump for not making an economic deal rather than him getting bullied into a military problem. And that's where the line in the sand that Donald Trump had with Zelensky in the Oval Office was, we're not going to let this economic deal turn into a military deal.
The next thing we're talking about is slapping tariffs on imports. So Trump's taxing imports from places like China and Mexico to save U.S. jobs. Democrats say it'll jack up prices on everyday stuff. Let's talk about what happened before. Truman raised wool tariffs to 50% in 1951, with Democrats backing farmers. JFK slapped a 25% tariff on steel imports in 1962, and Democrats called it a workers' win. LBJ kept textile tariffs at 20% in 1965 to shield jobs, with Democrats nodding along. Biden kept Trump's 25% steel tariffs from 2018, adding 10% on some imports in 2022, with Democrats saying it protected industry. So tariffs were pro-worker for Truman, JFK, LBJ, and Biden. But now with Trump, it's obviously people are up in arms.
And Obama slapped tariffs on tires.
Yeah.
Every Democrat president has used tariffs as either a negotiation tool like Trump is, or what? Go ahead, ask your question. I interrupted you.
So
I got ahead of myself.
How are Americans supposed to afford groceries if Trump's tariffs make everything cost more?
The point here is that we have been funding the economies of the world through deficit spending. And we are more than $36 trillion in debt. And we go $2 trillion in debt every single year. $1 trillion of that is just servicing the debt. You cannot run your household that way. We can't run our household running that type of debt. What we have done is we've allowed these other countries to stymie American industry through tariffs, protecting their companies while allowing them to have free trade status with us. And it is important that these are reciprocal tariffs, not retribution. If you are tariffing our products at 10%, we're going to tariff your products at 10%. If you don't want tariffs on your products, take the tariffs away from our products. It's that simple. And
did you answer the question?
Far too long, we have allowed countries to take advantage of us, and we've acted as their doormat.
You're still thinking high level. We need to bring it down to the American people. Are these tariffs going to affect groceries, and how do we get groceries to be cheaper?
It depends on the actions of these other countries. If South Africa, which has their largest export of food, is to the United States, if they want to continue to tariff our products at what they are, we don't tariff their agriculture products at all. Yet any product that goes into South Africa is tariffed. And so that's stopping. If South Africa then decides to change their way of raising money off of the American people, then it won't affect food prices at all. But it is likely to affect some food prices that are from farms that are not grown domestically.
So what do you think is the best way to help Americans understand the importance of tariffs and the pros or cons of them, whatever it may be? Obviously, Trump is not doing that. He's not getting the message out to make American people understand why tariffs are important.
Just in 6 weeks, Donald Trump has negotiated $2 trillion worth of corporate investment in America just through the threat of tariffs, just through the threat. Are Americans going to feel the brunt of this? Maybe until fall, maybe. But the truth of the matter is,
But explain what that corporate investment means.
so that corporate investment means that you're going to have a new Honda plant in Indiana. You're going to have new companies come in from places like Vietnam because they don't want to face the tariffs. That then provides jobs to build the manufacturing facilities. Let's call it manufacturing or whatever we do. Apple bringing $500 million worth of investment into Arizona to build the chips for iPhones here instead of building those overseas. By having these tariffs, even if it does cost more, I think Americans have to look at it like I'm helping my neighbor have a job versus having bananas at 39 cents a pound instead of 49 cents. Paying that extra 10 cents per pound is helping my neighbor have a job in America versus somebody having a job in South Africa or South America or Asia. I think that's where people will see it. That does take a little bit of time to generate within the economy. It could, depending on how other countries decide to handle these tariffs, not affect American consumers at all for the most part, because countries could say, you know what, we're going to go to the negotiation table and we're going to say, maybe we're taxing you at 20%, but we really need to drop it to 5%. And if we drop ours to 5%, we drop yours to 5%. Yeah, well, 5% is not going to cripple anybody. It's these 25%. We've already heard Honda and Apple and others talk about at least $2 trillion worth of investment in the United States economy, hiring workers here, which includes people who are in the construction industry or telecommunications industry or buying iPhones or any of those things that it takes to make a company work. All those are going to be American jobs in America that are being created.
Let's talk about pushing tax cuts and scaling back education. So Trump's rushing to extend the 2017 tax cuts, which expire at the end of 2025, and add new ones like the tax on tips, while freezing the Department of Education funds, aiming to gut it and let states take it over. Democrats hate both, saying tax cuts favor the rich and education cuts hurt kids. Let's talk about what happened before. JFK slashed corporate taxes from 52% to 47% in 1962, with Democrats cheering growth. Carter cut capital gains taxes from 49% to 28% in 1978, and Democrats saw it as job friendly. Clinton trimmed education department funds like $500 million from vocational programs in 1996, and Democrats called it streamlining. Also cut capital gains from 20% in 1997. Obama extended Bush's tax cuts in 2010, top rate at 35%, with Democrats saying it saved the economy. Biden kept Trump's tax cuts intact of 37% top rate while adding child tax credits in 2021, with Democrats touting family relief. So tax cuts and education trims were fine under all of the Democrat administrations. Trump's obviously evil for doing the tax cuts and then also getting rid of the education department. The biggest question that I hear all the time is why give rich folks tax breaks and cut school funds when regular families are struggling?
First of all, the Department of Education is not school funds. School funds come from the state level, not the federal level. But the Department of Education, let's get that one out of the way first, is a compliance agency, not an education agency. And you would think that Democrats would want to lean into this because Donald Trump has already used the Department of Education as a compliance agency, saying if you have DEI in your education in your state, you will lose federal funding. And so you would think Democrats would take this opportunity to take an arrow out of Donald Trump's quiver for the next 4 years by eliminating the Department of Education, because if they keep it, Donald Trump's still going to do the same thing Democrats did, which was use it as a compliance agency against states. And that's the wrong thing to do. And Donald Trump is saying that it is the wrong thing to do. That's why we need to get rid of it. And as I've said before, I believe the money should follow the child. And people who disagree with that are either pro-bloated, school board administrations or pro-union, because those are the only two things you're defending if you don't want the money to follow the child.
Can you specifically say what you mean by that?
So if we're spending $10,000 a year per child in Florida to educate K through 12, and I want my child to go to either a different public school or a private school, then that $10,000 goes to the other school, public school, or the private school that I want to take my child to. And children should not be stuck in failing schools because of their geography. And that's what we've had in our country since the beginning of time, is that if you're stuck in a low, socioeconomic neighborhood, you have less education opportunities than people in more affluent areas. And that's unfair to the child. It's unfair to parents. And I believe in giving parents the choice to take their children where they I don't understand why anybody would be against that unless they're for bloated administrations or just they're trying to protect teachers unions, which is wrong. Teachers unions aren't built for taking care of children. They're for taking care of teachers. I'm not saying that teachers out there don't care about their students, but a teachers union by its very nature is to protect teachers, not students, not to protect education, not to protect any of that. So that's part of the issue here. The second part of your question was, why do rich folks get tax breaks, right? I don't know that, despite what Democrats say, lowering taxes or eliminating taxes on Social Security, lowering taxes on overtime, eliminating taxes on overtime, eliminating taxes on tips is not tax breaks for the rich. That's simply a talking point that Democrats have been able to use for more than a generation to try to pit Americans against one another to keep their own political power. And it's wrong, and they should stop doing it. They should be intellectually honest with the American people, and they should take a stand on whether or not they support eliminating taxes on Social Security, on tips, and on overtime. Because Democrats refuse to answer that question. But they're like, we're against the tax breaks for the rich. Well, no, answer what's going on right now. What's going on right now is these are the tax breaks we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And so take a stance there, but they don't want to because they want to claim they're for American workers. And yet the American workers this last election know darn good and well they're not for American workers. They're for taking American workers' tax dollars and giving them to people who are not working to secure votes. And that's the main hypocrisy of the Democratic Party.
The next topic we're going to talk about, which is big today, is boosting support for Israel. Trump's ramping up support for Israel big time. Think more military aid, like $26 billion package he's pushing in early 2025, and maybe moving more embassy staff to Jerusalem. Democrats are mad, saying it ignores Palestinians and fuels conflict. Let's talk about what happened before. Truman recognized Israel in 1948 within 11 minutes, with Democrats cheering moral duty. JFK sold Hawk missiles in 1962, first big arms deal, and Democrats called it a special relationship. LBJ sent Phantom jets in 1968 post Six-Day War, with Democrats backing Israel's strength. Carter gave $3 billion annual aid via Camp David in 1978, and Democrats hailed peace building. Clinton upped aid to $3.1 billion yearly by 1998, with Democrats proud of the alliance. Obama signed a $38 billion aid deal in 2016, and Democrats touted historic security support. Biden pushed $14.3 billion extra aid in 2024 after Hamas attack, with Democrats mostly backing his ironclad stance. So Democrats from Truman to Biden poured aid and arms into Israel, but of course Trump's extra boost to bridge is too far for them. Does piling more money and guns into Israel just make peace with Palestinians harder?
I think you did a good job there of laying out that Israel has been a generational ally for the United States, and we need to maintain it. Every president, regardless of naysayers, has supported Israel, and Donald Trump is going to continue to support Israel. Israel's a sovereign nation. They have the right to protect themselves. And we know that Hamas had these heinous acts against civilians, and they still hold hostages. They're holding remains of dead hostages, and it needs to end. Part of the problem with the Democratic Party is that they now have members of Congress who will stand up and proudly say they're more allegiant to other countries. And I don't know how a member of Congress is allowed to vote, number one. If you're more allegiant to another country than the United States, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. How you're able to become a member of Congress saying that you are more allegiant to another country is treasonous. And they certainly should be able to serve as a member of Congress. So I think
Has there been people that have said that they are more allegiant to another company or country?
yes, you have the Congresswoman from Michigan in particular who has said she's more allegiant to Somalia. Um, and there's another one. The names are going to escape me right this second, but there's two women on the Democratic caucus who claim they're more allegiant to other countries. The Democrats are having a problem being pro-American. Like within their own caucus, they have people who are for other countries over America, elected officials in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so they are grappling with how do they even present a pro-American stance, much less a pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian. And we know that Democrats have supported the Palestinian protests on college campuses, so much so that Jewish kids cannot go to school, cannot attend classes. They're harassed just endlessly. And, and that's on American soil. Can you imagine what's happening over on other soil? And so I'm glad that Donald Trump is following in the footsteps of all those presidents, every single president.
So really,
it's
no different. It's just more of the same, just a different time.
Here's the thing. Donald Trump has a lot of bravado and people don't like it. He says, I'm going to have a Trump hotel in Gaza. Well, whether he meant that or not, I don't know. Or whether he was just trying to stir the pot, I'm not sure. He very well could be 100% serious about that. But he also could have been just trying to goad the opposition.
Yeah.
I imagine people in the room when he said it aren't 100% sure one way or the other. He doesn't help himself from a public relations end. That's why I've said that people voted for Donald Trump because he leads us through fire despite the fires he sets. And that's a perfect example that these folks who want to cut aid to Israel want to promote, to Ukraine. Like they're hypocritical in this very moment about two different theaters, and their arguments ring hollow. We're trying to negotiate an end to both of these wars that were started under Biden. I think every day that goes by, the American people see that Biden and, by extension, Obama left the world in a worse place than when they got the keys to the White House. They left this. It's like pizza. It's like renters, and now the electricity's been turned off and there's pizza boxes all over the floor. And so they've moved out. And now we have to come in and clean up the mess before we can straighten some other things out. And it is a mess, whether it's domestic or foreign. And at some point, Barack Obama railed against George W. Bush through his entire 8 years as president. And at some point, I think we have to, maybe not 6 weeks, but, after 6 months, it's kind of like, okay, did Trump's things work or not? Yeah. It's going to take a while to turn the ship around. I think it's fair to continually criticize the Biden administration. At some point, the buck has to stop with the decisions that are being made today. I think that we're making positive movement. But Democrats are standing in the way every way they can, whether that's from a political standpoint or whether it's from a public relations or whether it's legal. They're trying to file lawsuits to stop every single thing that Donald Trump is doing. And I think at the end of the day, politically, that does not work out well for Democrats.
Well, that's all I have today. I'm going to leave with this question. The next time you hear someone cheering or complaining about politics, maybe ask, would they say the same thing if their team was doing the exact same thing?
You did a great job researching all this. Thank you for that. I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, and you kind of came up with this idea a day or two ago, and I was like, oh, let's run with it. Mm-hmm. And here we are, 7 major topics that Donald Trump is dealing with. Yeah. And what were your thoughts as you were researching it? Because I know that there were times where you thought that the criticisms were fair.
The whole purpose of this show is to help people understand politics in a relatable way. And because that's something that I really never had until I met you, quite honestly. I take
I'm a life changer is what you're saying.
I take a lot of the topics that we talk about from social media. I see friends, just anybody who's on social media that are complaining about certain things. And that's where, it fuels me to be able to like, okay, well, let's talk about this and let's talk about it in a realistic manner to see, was this done before? How did people react to it? Or is this something brand new that people are just freaking out about? That's my basis. And that's what I want to do. That my goal is to help people understand things that Trump are doing today is not the first time it's ever been done in history. Don't follow what the Democrats are saying, all of the gloom and doom and, he's killing the country and all of that, because it's probably been done before and we've survived. I just really want to make this platform easy for people to hear the topics, to understand them, to ask questions if they want to, and not feel weird about it. Because quite honestly, after seeing this, it's really just mind blowing that you can have history repeating itself, but have the same people react completely different. And it's just really disheartening for me.
So that kind of begs the question, do you think that Donald Trump is wrong, or do you think he should change his approach, or do you think it's public relations, or was Donald Trump right when he said in his address to Congress that
That's
no
right.
matter what he does, he'll never get Democrats to clap?
I think that's exactly it. I think you have people in your life that no matter what they do, you don't like them and you're never going to accept what they say or do. It's never going to change anything. They could save you from your burning house, but it wouldn't matter. And I think that's exactly how people see Trump. Like you said, he has bravado. He toots his own horn. He lets people know everything that he's doing. And good, bad, or ugly, it is the way that it is. But I know for me that I felt safest the 4 years that he was in office, and I feel safe today. And I don't think you're ever going to please everybody all the time. It's just impossible.
Well, it's one of the life lessons. I've always said I'm going to write this book about parenting. And one of the parenting lessons my dad, the minister, the chaplain gave me, I was mad at some kid at school. And I just don't like it. And I was, raised to, oh, you're supposed to love everybody. And Dad just looked down. He's like, well, Jamie, we don't have to like everybody, but we do have to love them. That was kind of a life lesson that I've tried to take throughout my career is somebody's going to rub you the wrong way. And it is what it is, but you try to still respect them. And thank you for your comments, because that's the one thing I think we try to do on this show and try to do on social media is whether it's YouTube, Substack, or wherever we are, is we try to be respectful of other people's views. I always like to say until I can't. Once you attack me and start calling me names, I'm going to defend myself.
It's interesting for me because Trump was the first person that I voted for. And yes, he was Republican. Did I have my Republican, shoes planted in cement? No, I didn't. And when it came down learning more after spending these few years with you, I really went into the last election with open mind and open heart. And I think it's just very important that everybody understands that, yes, we have differing views. I think everybody's goal is the same. Hopefully everybody's goal is the same. We just all may go about it different ways. I think that's just what we have to sit back, relax, and see what happens. And we'll just keep breaking it down for the next 4 years and see where we land.
I do think for us to be a leader in the world that we have to get our own finances in order. We can no longer afford to deficit spend to support, wars. We can no longer afford to deficit spend to support, other people importing to us, but them not accepting our imports. We're deficit spending on these things. Yeah. To make everybody be our friend. And it's great if you have unlimited amounts of money. And the truth of the matter is we don't. I had a call with a podcast across the pond, and we had this very discussion, and they were flabbergasted. They had no idea that Americans were going $2 trillion in debt every year.
Wow.
And they were like, how can you do that? I was like, that's the problem. We can't. And yet everybody is sitting there saying, hey, we're abandoning, well, for us to be a true leader of the world, we have to be an economic powerhouse. For us to be an economic powerhouse, we can't be $36 trillion in debt. I think people are starting to realize that that's been going on for a long time, that we haven't had a balanced budget since, there's plenty of blame to go around to both political parties, all political leaders. And the hard truth is we now have a political leader who's trying to rein that in. And we need to get behind that in a bipartisan way to support economic strength in America, or America will cease to exist in the form we know it today.
This has been Reasonable Arguments, News and Nonsense. There is so much BS on the mainstream media news, but you knew that. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. See you next time as husband and wife duo Jamie and Jennifer keep it real on Reasonable Arguments.